Okay, I'm just going to get stuck into some mucking around with some photos, and we can pick up whenever anyone jumps in. Okay, let me just turn that off. Go back to my desktop. Whoa, trippy. Okay, and we're just going to jump in here. So I've got a bunch of photos loaded up in Photoshop. These are all the ones that I've already done, so I'm going to bring up a whole new one. I'm going to close this down and bring up my Lightroom, which for some reason I did not already have open. This will let us work from like the raw screenshots out of Richard Burns Rally. Boo 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 boo. I have no idea what this warning is. Offline destination is offline. Okay, don't know what they're talking about. Oh, there's another new version. We will not be updating that today. Anywho, if I go back down to my photos, I'll get my library view. Oh, here we go. There we go. Big wide view now. So I have got so many photos sitting on this drive with which to work from. I guess first though we should talk about capturing the photo in the first place. So let's just pull this one up. It is still the proxy by the looks of it. There we go. And that's a real big, nice, crispy photo right there. I'm just going to bring up my details. Where are my details here? Here we go. Wow, probably hard to see from there. 3790 versus by 2300 pixels this picture. So you really want as much resolution as you can get out of the game. I tend to run my game at 4K when I'm grabbing photos. I'm just going to bring this back down and look at the launcher here. It's important to get as much anti-aliasing as you can get as well, because it'll smooth off all the edges on the car model. So you'll end up with like a lot of stair stepping around the car, which is kind of busy and has these straight lines on it. So I run 4K Vulkan 1.3 with 4 times SRS and I think like 8 times or 16 times anisotropic filtering. And then export in PNG as well, because it's as lossless as you need to have a really nice output picture. And then, of course, I've got everything cranked to high here. Cubic environment maps, you have to set to high every time you launch the game, because the launcher never saves it. And that's how you get the best reflections out of the car. So this is the setup that I use to take photos. You can push the resolution even higher if you want by using the control panel to force super sampling, so you can get like an 8K image if you need to do for some reason you need to do cropping but you can't just move the camera in. I think I saw like someone, RS Watts, was doing a reshade thing where he needed the surrounding area to use the lighting to color the road and things to sort of give some global illumination. So you needed a wide image, but then of course you needed to crop in to get the shot of the car. So you actually had to super sample up to like 8K to do that. And you can just use the video control panel. It's got that built in, so that's easy to do. But yeah, I just take pictures at 4K because I do all my processing by hand instead of by coloring in with reshade. So anyway, we'll jump back out to a wide shot here, and we'll go and find some suitable photo to muck around with, I think. I'm seeing like I've got my iPad here with the comments on it because I don't have 2 monitors, so I've got this weird delay that keeps catching me at the corner of my eye here. Alrighty, what have we got? So much stuff to play with. We're gonna do an action shot, I guess. In fact, let's look at real photos here, because there's some things we can point out in real photos. Here we go. It's a nice one of Colin McRae. So this is a photo is taken with a long lens. This is like a 300, at least a 300, more like a 400mm lens, I think. on a full frame sensor. And what that does is the longer your lens is, the more compression you have between the foreground and the background. It basically makes the background look bigger, and it makes the sides of the screen look bigger. Oh, is it covering the control panel? Okay. Here we go. Let's shove that down to the bottom then. Click that. No. I've got it. GoPro. Alright. Yeah, that's probably going to be better down the bottom. My outline. Something like that. Looks about right. Okay. So back to it. You have camera controls in Richard Burns Rally to zoom. You can move the camera. You can also zoom your camera in and out. And oftentimes there's a different combination. If you're close to the car and have a wide-angle lens, the car is the same size in the shot as if you're further back but more zoomed in. But the image isn't the same, because when you have a wider angle lens, in the center of your image here in the foreground, this front corner of the car would be exaggerated, and the sides of the car, the ends of the car, and the background would be diminished. So you sort of end up with, you get that more warpy look the wider you go, and the longer you go, the squarer your car will look. So this is a very square looking car with a large looking background. It's quite a long camera, because obviously rally cameramen can very rarely be on the road with the car. It's not safe to do so. So if you've ever taken pictures of cars going past or anything at a distance with your mobile phone, you'll know that a wide-angle lens makes everything look tiny and far away. So if you want to get a good shot of the car, you tend to want a long lens. So I do a lot of that style of screenshot in Richard Burns Rally to work with. We've also got everything in the background is blurry, because we've got quite a narrow depth of field for having such a long camera. And then trying to take a fast photo, you need a big wide aperture, so you end up with a blurry background and an in-focus car that you've taken with a shutter speed as high as you can while you're tracking the car. So we've got the foreground is just blurred out a little bit at the bottom here. If we, I don't even know, you can see my cursor will be so damn tiny. But then we've got the whole car is in focus from front to back. And then our depth of field falls out, and we've got this crowd in the background with these little, you can see edges on these highlights. They're not round, they're kind of squared off, and those are actually the aperture blades of the camera lens. So these are all effects that we want to capture in our photo that we make. So I'm going to go into here, and I think I got a nice stadium shot here of the Delta, which we can do the same thing with. Let me just open it up here and bring up my effects. I've already done some work on this one, so let me just revert it. Reset edits. Boom. So this is how it came out of Richard Burns Rally. And this doesn't look like the photo that we were just looking at. Everything is in focus, from the ground right at the front here at the bottom line to the little people right up in the corner of the screen. So this doesn't look like a photograph to me. Even though it was shot with this is a bit of a wider angle lens than our Colin McRae photo. You can see we've got more exaggeration on this front quarter. I was doing that to try and capture as much of the background as I could, to sort of set the environment shot a little bit more. Because if I'd gone with that same tight shot that they had on the Colin McRae car, you'd probably only see up to about here in the stand, and I wanted to get all these people. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to introduce that depth of field to get the camera looking right. So I've got this tool in Lightroom which makes things so hilariously easy compared to the manual way. I will do a video on the manual way if people want to see it, but I just love being able to turn on this and have this automatically do it for me. It's so good, and we can adjust the amount of blur that we have. So we can say we've got the aperture wide open on this camera now. Background is obliterated, and this is a really nice roll off of blur that we get with this tool. Down in the bottom here, we've actually got a little histogram that shows you the depth of all of the parts of the image. So it shows you what we've got right up close, what we've got way down in the furthest reaches of the picture. And if I click this, we can actually visualize it with like a heat map. So this is the depth imaging that Lightroom has generated using some AI tools and things. And this is where you come to do little touch-ups to fix things up. So for instance, we've got some little dark spots here on the car. So I'm going to actually go to my focus and maybe just paint a little bit of this in. There we go. That looks pretty good now. I prefer doing all my painting on why can't I color that bit in? That is very strange. Whoa. Well, that was unwanted. Well, it's a big brush. Not sure why I can't paint that in. I'm not terribly well versed on this tool because I have been doing a lot of it just on the iPad, which doesn't have the ability to feather things in and finish it. But now, if we look at like the way that we've got this blur going in the background, the thing that we do here that you can't do manually, or I don't know a way of doing it manually, is introducing the shape to the bokeh, which is the blurred sections here. So every highlight we've got in the background has it sort of generates like a halo, which is the shape of the aperture in the camera lens. If you do things, so if you do it manually, what you do is you create a blurred version of the image, create a sharp version of the image, and then you can blend between the two. And that will get you an out of focus look where you can paint like the trees that are in the foreground back into sharpness and stuff like that, and vary it with using a couple of 3 or 4 layers. You can do it that way pretty quickly as well if you've got like a Wacom or something or an iPad and you can brush it in. But I can't replicate the way that the highlights generate this bokeh, and we actually have different sort of shapes that we can make it. So if I pick this. Now we've got that bladed, I think it's like a 5-bladed aperture here instead of the 6 that I saw on the on this photo. Well, we've got those little shapes in the background that are not round. They got little flat edges, so we can replicate that here. We can also do things like ring bokeh, and this is really common, a common artifact when you use a zoom lens camera, like an adjustable zoom lens camera. Because they have so many lens elements inside them, you sort of get this like soap bubble appearance, which is why portrait photos don't tend to be taken with variable zooms. They use something called a prime lens, which is just a single focus lens, has fewer elements, and the elements that are in there are there to make the image look really good. But yeah, we're just going to go with our simple look here. We can even adjust, you can even adjust like the highlight strength. And sort of it's amazing the kind of tools that we have available in Lightroom these days. Anyway, from here on in, we're going to do a little bit of color correction, I think. I'm going to hit auto and see what it does. Yeah, that's brightened it up pretty nicely, but I'm not a huge fan of these colors here. Still looks a little bit cartoon, like a sort of cartoony colors. So I'm going to go in and load a profile. Here we go. I'm just going to go with one of the basic ones that brings out the yellow and the red nicely. There we go. That looks good. Brightens things up a little bit, adds a little bit of color to our highlights. Collapse that back down. And I want to do a crop here. So this is sort of like a order of events that we do to set up an image to then make it to add movement. We add movement after we sort our focus. So I'm just going to go OK on that. So now I've cropped out the white bar that I get when I grab screens from the game. And it's looking pretty good here now. Everything is looking all right. I want to do one other thing, which is create a little bit of a softness with distance, sort of add a little bit of atmosphere to this image. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go to my mask tool. And I always mask the subject out in these photos. So I've gone like an auto detect subject. It's going to pick my car out. you could grab a car if you've got like a nice contrast between foreground and background, like a red car on a snow stage or something. You can usually get away with the Magic Wand tool or the Quick Selection tool and just drag it around the car and it'll grab you an outline. You can then apply a mask to that or cut the car out and use that later. But I've just done like a select subject is really tight in Lightroom. It's really good at picking it out, and you can go in and you can add or remove parts where it's missed. So it actually has missed a little bit off the front of here. So I'm going to add a little to this mask. All right. Just want to pick that bumper up. And I think we're pretty good, and I don't need to touch much else in here. Sometimes you have to sort of delete a little bit out around the front of the car here, where the shadow comes down to the wheels. But that's a pretty good selection. So now that I've got this masked out, okay, thank you. I don't need to edit that. Now that I've got it masked out, I can run a few effects. So what I want to do is I want to turn the clarity up. And that's going to make the car look almost a bit grainy and sharp. But we're actually going to bring this up and then take it down for the whole image, so we get that differentiation between the car and the background. A little bit of pop. You can also look at like the dehaze here to sort of simulate the bounced light that's coming off of different surfaces. So if we've got a car sitting in the snow on a sunny day, we're going to get a lot of light bouncing off the snow and under like the underside of these shaded areas on this car. Richard Burns Rally is it's a game from 2004, so it doesn't have things like that bounce lighting built in. So we have to replicate it. So you'll see like in a lot of snow photos, the car will look overly dark underneath, like around the sides and bottom, which is something we can correct pretty easily by doing things like lifting the shadows on the car in post, which is great. So we've separated it out. We can lift the car up a little bit. Of course, here in this area, we're not going to have too much bounce lighting because we've got a dark surface here. We've got dark walls and everything like that. So we might just leave that down a little bit like that. But the car is still popping off nicely. And I think that's pretty much everything I want to touch on the mask that we've done. Just add a little bit of clarity and then lift the shadows a tiny bit. And now I'm going to go back to my regular image. And I'm going to go down to effects and I'm going to drop the clarity. So if we drop the clarity a whole lot here, you can see it's really softened up the background. And that just adds this sort of like little atmospheric effect I like. But I'm going to take it down so we've got about a +10 delta on our car over the original image. And then we can use dehaze to simulate things like a bit of glare on the lens. Up and down it goes. Hard to pick what we want to do with this lighting, because we should have arena lighting in here, so it should actually be quite directional. I might just leave it like that. This looks fine. Okay, so now that we've got our depth sorted, we want to make this car look like it's actually moving. Because even though I was sitting on the start line here and took the photo, this could be the second lap of the stage, and you would never know. If you took the screenshot of the car coming past, you might have like a bit of like a lift at the front from where the car's accelerating to indicate that it's moving. But otherwise, this could be a moving shot straight out of RBR, and you would have no idea of knowing. So we're going to actually make this car into a moving car from a stationary one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go File and Edit in Photoshop. You could just save, like if you're working in different programs, like on the iPad, I tend to work between Lightroom, Photoshop and Affinity Photo because Photoshop doesn't have motion blur. So I have to export to Affinity Photo, add my motion blurs, and then take that back to Photoshop and put the image back together into a stack. And I'll show you some little examples of how that was done in just a minute. But now we've got this in Photoshop, we can do some more editing tools. The first thing I'm going to do is select my subject again. And it's grabbed it, but it hasn't grabbed it perfectly well. So I'm going to go to my quick selection tool here. And I'm going to add my front bumper in and then take that back out. Whoops. There we go. Remove that section. You just sort of keep adding and removing as you go. Make sure you're grabbing all the edges. This is pretty well defined. We've got like a nice sort of like color definition between the car and its background, so this is not too bad. And it's also preferable to sort of over-select your car a little bit. Over-select your selection a bit. Oh, got a bit far there. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Down in the shadows, we can take a little bit more, and than the car. It's best to it's best to have like a little margin around your car than lose some of the car when you're doing your cutting. There we go. That's pretty good. It's a box, so it's not too hard to do. So I'm going to go Control C, Control Shift V, and now I've got my car cut out. I've actually lost the front wheel here, I think. Yeah. And it's pretty much the only major victim. I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup here, but I'm just going to go back to here and grab that front wheel because we want it. Otherwise, I will lose it. So I'm going to go to my quick selection tool again onto our base layer. Grab this. Right. Cut it in a little bit. That looks good. Doesn't matter if I select any of the bodywork here, because now it's going up here. I'm going to merge it back down so I've got them grouped together. And now I've got my whole car that we need. I'm just going to do a little bit of a cleanup with the eraser because you might notice a little bit of motion blur down here. Doesn't have to be perfect. There we go. This is why I do prefer working with the iPad, but I don't have full functionality of Photoshop, so it's a bit annoying. You know what? I'm just looking at this tire here, and I want to grab a little bit more of this tire off the background. Go to my quick selection tool again. There we go. Control C, Control Shift B. Just want to keep them merged. Not building anything too massively layered today, so I don't need to keep everything separate. You know what? I did screw that up just then. There we go. There we go. That's our car separated out. Well, I might take this a little bit off here, actually, while we're here. Cool. All right, so now what we can do is grab our background, to select subject on it again, and this is the part that is going to matter the most, and we're going to see. I'm going to go and do a content-aware fill on that whole thing, and delete the car off the background. Boop. And it looks wacky, but it doesn't matter, because the only parts that really matter about what we're doing is the front and back edges. Whoa. Let me just undo a little bit of that. Deselect. I'm going to just take this off a little bit. Keeps really wanting to grab a lot of that, doesn't it? There we go. Do a content-aware fill there. I think I have my tolerance set too wide or something. There we go. And one more content-aware fill. There we go. Now we've lost that back edge. That's good. Deselect. Okay, now we've got this dumb-looking ghost of a car. Oh, hey CB. Now this looks really wacky, but the idea is that this car is going to go on top of this image. And all I need here is clear borders around the outside. So I did use content aware fill, but you could easily do this with a clone stamp and just taking the edges in. We want to take as many pixels in with a nice clean looking background as possible. Because when we apply the motion blur, and I'll show you that now, we go with filter, blur, motion blur. So let me just reset this to 0 degrees because we're going to have it go, oops, didn't mean to do that. Filter, blur, motion blur. So what a motion blur does is it takes the pixels and it sort of stretches them either way. And we've got 127 pixel distance here. So to get a clean background, we want to have like 127 pixel margin basically on either side. And the more that you stretch it for more motion blur, so the car's going past the camera faster and faster, we need more and more stretch, we need more and more clear border of pixels, otherwise we'd end up with like yellow coming out from behind the car and you get these flared front and back sections on the car, which we do not want. So I have, that is the reason we've cleaned it up, but our car is not moving that fast. It's not moving that fast past our camera. It is coming in at a very slight angle though. So if we imagine we're panning the camera to keep the car in focus, so the car is fixed in our camera lens, the background is going to be moving down at like a couple of degrees, sort of in line with that wall on the back there. So I'm just going to tilt it down 5 degrees, which is going to keep this line in the background here nice and sharp. And we'll call it 78 pixels. There we go. So now when we put our car back on top, we've got a razor sharp front and rear edge with this nice smooth motion blur and no freaky artifacts hanging around anywhere. And that's like the big difference that I see. Like in a lot of people who do these edits on these photos, and they just motion blur the car static on the shot, and you get these sort of flary edges off the front and back. It's also a thing that a lot of games that have like motion blur built in, so like R Factor 2 and things, have that kind of haloing, because there's no other way to do it. You can't take frames that don't exist and then use it to fill the background in. This is pretty much the only way you can do it. There is the trickier part in these shots here, where you can see through the car, is we would grab this out here and then apply the same blur. But I'm not really feeling like I want to do all of that today, but I guess we can just try and grab it a bit. I'm using a big brush here. But you can keep refining and refining and refining. That's pretty good, actually. Control-C, Control-Shift-V. I'm going to put that on top, and I'm going to apply the same blur to that now. That doesn't look too bad, actually. We could just blend the edges off of it a little bit. If I just look at it as it is, and then get my erase tool and change my hardness. Whoa. I may have lost my camera. That's okay, I can get that back up in just a second. There we go. So now we've got a little bit of blur in the background there, and we've got this. So now our car, it looks like it's kind of moving, although the wheels are completely stationary. Oh, now we've lost that. Yeah, definitely lost that camera now. I do have a power cable around here. Might grab that in a second. Anyway, I thought I had way more battery in this camera than that. It is getting pretty old though. So our car is moving, but it's sliding. It's got 4 locked wheels at the moment. This is a problem. I'm going to go back to my I'm going to merge that down actually. I'm going to go back to my car layer here, and we're going to take these wheels off. So I'm going to go quick select and grab my wheel, refine it down. Ooh. Looks pretty good. We want to take as much of the wheel as possible, but none of the background. And it's okay if we don't grab all the tire, as long as we grab all the writing on the tire. And I'm actually going to take a bit of the tread out of what we're doing, because it is not in the same plane as our wheel. So we want our wheel face is going to be a nice oval shape. And that's what we're going to blur with our radial blur, which I'm about to do now. Control C, Control Shift V. So now we've got our wheel face, if you will. And we've got a special spin blur here for Photoshop. I'm going to pin him right in the center of this wheel. There we go. And shrink it down. And Photoshop has got the best spin blur because we can make it elliptical. Like that. With most spin blurs, they're stuck as like a circle. So it can be really tricky to do wheels that aren't facing the camera. So if you've got a car going straight past the camera, you can get a really nice round blur with very basic spin. But only Photoshop lets you change the shape and also skew it, so we can take into account like cars jumping at angles and things like that. But there we go. That's a nice spin. That's spinning pretty quickly. This would be a fairly slow photo to be that spun. But we are taking we're in a stadium at night under lights, so it's probably not going to have. We're going to have to slow the shutter speed down if we can. To get enough light and run it at low enough ISO. Otherwise, we'd have a really grainy photo. So anyway, that is done. That's blurred up nicely. So we can turn it back on. And we've got a really nice blurry front wheel. Look at that. The other thing we're going to do is fix this tire tread though. So I'm going to go back to here, and I've got a smudge tool is my best friend. If I can remember where it is. Smudge. There we go. And this is actually what I use to, don't know why the stripes on this tire actually. It might be a bit of a problem with the model. Needs cleaning up a bit. Anyway, we just smudge that to get to sort of clean the tread up a little bit. Otherwise you have nice defined tread blocks and it looks like your tire isn't spinning. So I just smudge those out with the smudge tool and it looks nice. But we've got slicks on this car, so not really an issue. Okay, our front wheel's done. The back wheel has lots of spokes, so this one's going to be going to look really nice when it's spinning. Doesn't just have the turbo fan crammed on it. Back to my quick select. Whoa. There we go. Way too much. What are we doing? Get that front wheel out of there. Knock it all back. Looks pretty good. Don't want to get any of the bodywork in this. There we go. Oops, meant to undo, not do. Knock that back a little. If we add any spin, if we sort of pick up any of the yellow off the car body, and then apply a spin blur, it'll look, it'll drag a yellow line like when you are coloring in with crayons and you hit a bit of black, you know. Control C, Control Shift V, and we'll isolate that now. We might leave the background in just for funsies. And we're going to keep on that layer and go to our blur tool. And stick him in the middle. Where is he? No, come here. There we go. And we're going to shrink it. Looking pretty good. "15 degrees blur angle" is the same blur angle as the front wheel we used. Oh wait, I need to actually grab that text at the top there. There we go. Now he's spinning. Okay. There we go. Now we have a moving car. We can just export that as it is, and I think that's pretty much where I want it to. The only other thing I'd go in is like I want to go into these areas where you can see through the car and just keep cleaning it up and managing the blur a little bit. Is a sort of a bit over blurred there, a little bit under blurred in a couple of these spots. This is just stuff that you go in Lightroom and clean up. But yeah, there we go. That's a bit of a look at that. I will just try and grab this power cable that I've got here to bring this camera back to life. Not charging brick. Okay. Where did I put? Ah, that'll do it. All right. Sorry, 1 second, you guys. Aha. Okay, we're back. There we go. Oh, so yeah, now we can look at this photo here. We've got our blurred out background, our nice big car in the shot with its spinning wheels. They're angled. You can see the tread is blurred. This one's kicking up dirt. Of course, we don't have to worry about the particles on our nice tarmac that we're running on. Oh no, it's camera does not want to stay charged today. Anyway, so this is our static shot that we had. We came out of Lightroom having done the depth, having done the focus work, and then we've added the blur and the motion in Photoshop, and that's pretty much where I'd leave it. After this level, this is sort of the point where you would then start adding effects. So if you had like rain or snow, you could add it on top of this photo. The process of creating the blur and the movement does sort of obliterate any rain or snow particles that were in the shot. So you sort of have to go back in again and stick it back on top to fix it all up. And it also makes it nice and smooth. Sort of the difference between the car, which we cut out, and the background, which we blurred, would also change the way that the snow was rendered or the rain was rendered. So always sort of apply that afterwards. And we can actually look at how that was done on a couple of these other shots here. So here's a side-on shot that I did up with the Delta again. And I added my simple radial blur on these wheels because we're doing a perfect side-on shot. I took this photo with again, a very long lens, which gives it this really square appearance. The edges aren't like fading away. And the background has got a bit of motion blur to it. And I think I can peel off these layers here one at a time. And we can see what the shot looks like underneath, really. There we go. So that's my blurred background with just I did all my focus work and then added a little tiny bit of motion blur here. This car is not moving very quickly. There's just like a little softness to these edges here. Then I've added my car in on top. Then I darkened this a little bit under here because this was actually a fix that I put on the texture and on the template. Yeah, I know the camera is meant to be working off of the USB, powered off the USB. Normally I have this camera on my rig and I've got the USB cable straight into my powered hub and it keeps it charged forever. But I thought, oh, I'll just do this stream. I just charged it. It'll have like an hour and a half of 2 hours of battery, no problem. But apparently not. Anyway, yeah, I darkened this because this is just way too light to have the car shadowing it. Richard Burns Rally, of course, doesn't have any sort of projected like self-shadowing. So you'll see that the tops of these tires don't have any darkness from the wheel arches in them. It's like the sun is hitting them directly. And the same applied to the under tray here. It was just not being shadowed by the whole car that's on top of it. So I did fix that in the texture afterwards, but I just sort of made a quick fix here because this photo predates that texture fix. Then I've added a little bit of a dust kick up on the back wheel and a blur. So that wheel is now spinning and kicking dust up. And then I did a front dust blur. This is just like, these are just little textures that I grabbed off the internet. If we turn off everything else except for them, maybe, we can see the little dust flicks. They're just like really not much. Just a little grabbed random little sort of explosion or dust throw textures or snow textures or whatever. And then that's the whole package there with those blurred rims in there. It's a cool looking shot. This is one that I did of Lahanen's Clio. He was like, hey, does anyone want to do any edits? And I thought, we'll screw around and do some stuff. So this is actually the second one that I did with the Red Bull, because Alexi took a photo of his Red Bull can at an actual rally, which was pretty cool. I don't get out to many Arctic rallies myself, so this is the closest I can get, so I can delete him out. And this was, I changed the focus on this photo. Let's see if I've got a more in-focus version underneath. So, yeah, we can actually, for some reason, this layer is lifted too high, and I don't know why it's moved. I think it's just, oh. Okay. There we go. All right, so this was the original shot. I pulled the car off of that layer, and I've got a little bit of a blur on the background here. I added a little bit of motion blur. This car is like basically heading into the distance, but I wanted a little bit of lateral motion on here, so I added just a tiny little smidgen of motion blur, which also sort of adds a little bit of softness to the background. And then stick my car on top, and that was the this was just the basic shot. Then I thought more of this snow that's flicking off of the car here is going to sort of be coming up. I wanted to add a little more atmosphere to the shot, so I added this snow layer to the top. And if I turn this to normal and 100% opacity, you can just see it's like just a random black and white shot of snowfall. Which I turned down the opacity and then changed the blend mode to something like screen. Screen works really well, adds like a little bit of depth to it. And then I added a little Gaussian blur, like 4 pixels or something to it. You can actually add a bit of motion blur to this as well, because you are panning the camera, the motion blur doesn't just apply to the background, it would also apply to any snow that's falling. Because you're moving the camera past the snow's going straight down, it's going to stretch the snow slightly. And because the snow is also falling down, the angle of your motion blur for the snow is going to be closer to down than straight across. So if we're moving the camera straight across for the car, and the snow is falling down, and we're moving those at the same speeds, then it's going to be a 45-degree motion blur. But I just wanted it sort of, this is quite round looking, just a little bit softer. I just wanted this to sort of more emulate the flick up of snow coming off of the car, so more of a snapshot. but I think that has like a nice depth to it. This is I think here, from here, we'll switch over to just looking quickly at the, oh, that was for a Finlandia thing. I'm just seeing what I've done here. Oh, that's how I did that. Layered that in for a thumbnail. What is this layer? Oh, I see. I was adding a dust trail behind the car here. So we can see here, where does the car come out at this point? Added the snow on top of this one as well, just a little bit of depth. But underneath that is this basic photo here. I also then cut the car out a little. I cut the car off the background, and then inserted this dust kick up behind it to add, because I think this stage doesn't have any snow particles or anything. It just is. I think it's just got tarmac particles, so not much was going on. So I added a little bit of like dust kick up to the background, and then because I've added some extra lighting to the ground here with just the brush tool in Lightroom, and then lifting the exposure. So that's the easiest way I do like headlights, and I do it on sort of, it's not a perfect cone of light. It sort of dodges the darker parts and hits the bits of snow and lumpy bits to give a little bit of depth to the ground there. But also I do like any sort of edge that the light cone caught, like through here, you'd imagine there's sort of like some ripples to this snowbank, and each edge is going to catch a little bit of light. So I do little fingers of light down there as well, if the light was reaching it. And then when you add the snow on top, I think that's a pretty cohesive picture of a car nicely crossed up on its way into a hairpin with the headlights going. And then this one is a simple cut the car out, blur the background, spin the wheels, boom. This just happens to be a top shot looking down at a car and panning it. And I think that's it's a really nice model, the Celica TCT. It might be the best model in the game. It's so detailed. It's really gorgeous from all angles. And even above, looks fantastic. Love that car. Now, one of the other photos I have here, just for examples here. So here we have a lot of motion blur. This was quite a slow camera shot. This camera is mounted to a car pointed at that car, so there's no panning involved. Both cars are just moving past the background, which is how you get this really linear motion blur here. This one has got a lot of motion. This is a period shot of Walter Roll by the looks of it. I mean, I can see his face in there. And this has got some fantastic motion to it. You can see the direction of the motion here is driving off towards this back corner here. Car is nicely out sideways. We've got motion blur on the wheel, and the tire tread as well is like nicely blurred out. And then I've got this kick up of snow and stuff that's catching some light. So these are interesting effects you can do. And this is a wide angle lens. You can see like the front corner of this car is big, and then it diminishes off a little bit. Here we've got another example of this is a really crisp cutout of a car. Like if I was doing it in Photoshop, like this is a really good cutout of a car. The whole thing is perfectly in focus, and then the background disappears into blur. We've even got this like this kick up of dirt here is something I would add in post-processing, because we're gonna and then put it behind the front wheel and in front of the back wheel, and then layer that over the top of the blurred background. You can see there's like this is in front of blurred background, and that's not something that you can really pick out with any tool. So I'd just have a focused spray of dirt texture and stick it on the top there. But you can see like even like the tread blocks on the tire here. We can get right in and see this photo was taken with a very fast shutter speed, because that wheel is actually spinning in this photo, but it looks stationary. So this is a very, very fast photo, and there's no blur on these fronts. Very minimal blur on the back here, which is starting to just go out of focus. So this is a very fast shutter speed, and it's taken a really crisp photo, and that's how we stopped all of these bits of dirt and things, which are a cool effect. And you can also see there's like some sort of busyness to the blur in the background here. Like each of these, there's like those rings that I was talking about from using a zoom lens. Is that a bit of dirt flying up there as well? Maybe. Yeah, I just think that's a really nice, cool photo of a small car. And this is something that we can do in this style. This one's more complicated, but again, you can see the shape of the bokeh. We've got, it's not quite round anymore, and it's got a little bit of that soap bubble effect. So this is a zoom lens, and it is stopped down a little bit. There's also what looks like worms, which is a processing artifact that I get with my Fuji cameras in Lightroom for some reason. Usually happens from a bit of the sharpness calculations of Lightroom does this to my Fujifilm photos. It's a complete telltale of their sensor. Anyway, this is a cool car. That dust kicking up, catching light is tricky to do. I'd probably put add some extra dust layer, and then use Lightroom to light it up a bit, add a bit of golden hue. Tough to do, but cool shot. Shows off that bokeh effect and that variable, that depth of field effect. And again, the wheels on this are very stationary. This is a very fast photo. He may have locked the rear wheels at this point. It might be doing like a handbrake turn or something. I can't tell if the front wheel is spinning, but we have a lot of very stationary looking flying objects, so it's safe to assume this is a very fast photo as well. And here we can see like that motion blur on the tires. This is a very typical shot, I guess. Very similar style to what I've been doing, which is a very long lens again. Although this time it stopped down a little bit because the background isn't completely blurred out. But we still have nice sharp separation of the object in front of the blurry background. A little bit of wheel blur. And yeah, pretty nice even lighting on this. Anywho. Is it dying or is it... What is my camera doing? Come back to life. Nope. Maybe my cable's stuffed or something. My power cable. Okay, now it just keeps turning on and off again. No. Okay. Camera's beeping like crazy. Anyway. What was the other thing that I had in here? Let's close this down, actually. Oh, this is a top-down shot of the Stratos. This is just taken... Oh my god, I gotta stop the beeping on this thing. I'm just gonna go put it over there now. I can beep until it dies. Anyway, this was a simple like cutout. This is taken at very at quite a high resolution. We can get in and have a look at the reflection off of the fuel caps. It's such a good model as well. Actually, I should have blurred this. You can see the tire tread down here. I made a mistake. That should be spinning. That should have a smudge on it. Terrible. But anyway, just a simple bit of motion blur after cutting the car out. And most of the heavy lifting was done by the pretty good model and the very high resolution screenshot. This guy in here, this is interesting because the car was lifting its rear wheel on the way into a corner. So I blurred the front wheels, and I even blurred like the text on the inside of this wheel here. And then left the rear wheel nice and crispy. And then blurred the image around it. And because there was a little bit of foliage in front of the car, I actually had to cut the foliage out around the car, blur that independent of the background, and then put that on the top layer, the car in the middle, and the background in the back. You can use using like little tools like that to add a little bit of depth to an image is pretty cool, but it's a bit more work. And also, as you can see here, I was cutting out the background and the windows and blurring them. Left the back nice and sharp here, so you can actually see all of the stickers in the back window and things like that. I think that's a solid shot. And then this is the reverse shot of it, so because the car is now sort of apexing its turn, there isn't much blur at all laterally. Most of the heavy lifting here is done by depth of field. And then again, we spin the front wheel, we spin the other wheels on the inside of the car, and then leave this one nice and sharp. But you can see an error in the lighting here. Because cars don't self-shadow, the car body doesn't cast a shadow onto the wheels. These inside wheels are too light. They're underneath the car, and what I would normally do is grab these in Lightroom before I got to this stage and drop the exposure on these. So add a mask, and then drop the exposure to darken these wheels. And I probably would also do like this under tray here, because we're looking at the top of the under tray under the engine, and it's brown for some reason. I think it got a bit of dirt on it. But I think that's the only real giveaway to me in this photo is the lighting, the lack of shadow underneath the car. I remember this one was actually a little bit tricky because I blurred the background, but I wanted to keep these spikes from like the light effect. So I actually masked, like cut all of this out and added it to the top of the, to in front of this image here, but with a bit of opacity, so you can sort of still see the blurred image through the back of it. And then I may have used the smudge tool to to bury the edge. This one here I did on my iPad, and I didn't have access to a good angled spin blur. So the front wheel was okay because it's kind of round. The back wheel was kind of loopy because I sort of used a round spin blur and then had to go in and use a motion blur to deal with just the middle part of the wheel. It was tough to do, and it's kind of looks spherical or something here as a result. But it was really, I mean, these models are so nice. You've got like all the lighting detail in these looks really, really good. These headlights look fantastic. Twingo's a cool car. It's got great detail to it. Cool car. Getting things like the antenna, they will often disappear when you do the blurring. So another thing that I tend to do is grab a an image that has no depth of field blur like on it, and then my blurred one, and I import both of those into Photoshop, and then I can just sort of mask, reveal some of the unblurred image wherever I need like the extra detail. So if I lose like an edge or something, I can grab it off of the other image. Makes it easy. These are just some of the shots. I think this car has got like this Clio. No one drives these Clios, but man, the headlights on them look so good. Like, yeah, really detailed model. Lifting a rear wheel here looks pretty cool. But yeah, these headlights look crazy good, don't they? You can see, like, this was just on the iPad, and it sort of missed a little bit of the blur edge here, which I'd go in and manually fix normally, but from a distance, it looks pretty good. And it actually did keep, like, some of these little rocks that it flicked up with it are in focus too. Yeah, you can see them all under the car here. I thought that was a nice, neat touch. So that's why I like that shot. And yeah, this model is outrageously good. Look at this mesh texture on the back. Amazing stuff. The badging, all the underbody stuff. I don't know how Shen-Shi does it. I don't know how he got access to this car to do this. It was nuts. He got a ride in it as well. Awesome. Got a whole bunch of photos of it. Epic. So good at what he does. Oh, anyway, so these are a couple of the snow textures that I was using. So they're very simple. This is like some of the spray textures that I was using for snow, but of course, I can use you can tone it and color it to make it snow or dirt or sand or whatever you want. So I just like grab bits off of this whenever I need like a spray of snow coming off of the car when I hit a snowbank. This is this is the way that I step the shot together. This is all done on my iPad. So I think if we look at, where's the first one? This is the first one where I moved the car and fixed the background up a little bit. This is adding the motion blur. This is sticking the car in. And this is the car with the motion blur added. And then this is the snow layer on top. This was the shot. This is come out of Lightroom with just the depth of field added to it. So we've got the foreground blurred out and the background is just a little bit blurred. But this is sort of more sort of a rear set focus. Then I added the light here, so I thought that added a nice little bit of depth to it. Add the snow on top, and then add that spray off the back of it. That was a complete picture. Very cool. This is an edit, the other edit done on Lahanen's car. So I used the you can see I used the swirly ring bokeh to indicate that we're using a zoom lens here. And then I took the car out, and then I blurred the background at a slight angle because we're looking down, like we're panning down with the car. Then I cut the car out, and I took a little bit of the snow spray here with it, because when the car kicks up snow, it's driving along and creates a vacuum behind it. So we want to have some of that snow without motion blur on it, because it's traveling with the car. So I keep a little bit of this, sort of the pocket behind the car is going to have like sort of stationary snow, if you will. If I zoom out again. And now I've added the blur to the wheels. So I export this to Affinity Photo to add my blur to the wheels. And then I layer it back in Photoshop and then add a snow effect on top. And yeah, that looks pretty good. Oh, that was the original photo. Then this is my edit. Okay, here we've got the... So in this one, we've got a lot of grass in front of the car. So I actually was very carefully like clipping this out and then applying a blur to it to get that sort of that depth of the car behind. Pretty cool, pretty easy. This is a side-on shot, which has a really simple motion blur to it. Delete the car out, so to clean up those edges. Add my motion blur to it. Separately, take the car, add spin blur to the wheels, put the car back together with the background, and there we go. That's pretty simple, pretty good. This was an angled shot, so the straight screenshot has all this depth to it. Everything is sharp. First thing we do is we blur up the background, and you can see I've lost the antenna just up here. We've lost the antenna in the blur because I was doing this on the iPad again. Anyway, delete the car out. It looks like a mess in here, but it doesn't matter because all we need is the edges. Add my motion blur to it coming up at this angle. So I sort of lined it up with these stripes in the snow. Take my car, add my blur to the wheels, put them back together. And I added the antenna from the unblurred picture back in here. I just sort of clipped it out really carefully, stuck it in, and then I actually used the smudge tool to bend it and give it that vibration look. So it looks like it's bending back with some with the wind. And then add a little kick of spray out the back of it as well, because, why not? This was a cool shot because this is an example of, I did this on the iPad and I couldn't use a radial spin blur on these tires. So I actually went in with the smudge tool manually and just wiped the spokes basically, and wiped the riding, and then dragged the tread down as well. And I dragged the tread on all, so you can see like the snow spikes have got a sort of stretch to them. And this is just carefully just going grab, just little wipes to blur those spokes out. And I think that's got some really nice motion to it. The other thing I had to do in here was go into the back here and cut this out, and then add motion blur to this piece of the glass to get that motion blur through the car. You can see how busy and obvious it was before. And if you motion blurred everything around this, it would look like they had like a, I don't know, a sponge or something, a bit of drywall behind them in the car. So there you go. Adds a nice blur to it right through the car. Excellent model. I kept banging it up though, so it's a bit bent looking. That's that top-down shot of the car. Yeah, and there we go. That's a bit of a run through of my photo editing. using using Lightroom and Photoshop on the PC. Of course, yeah, you can also do it entirely on the iPad, but it does take slightly more tools to do. But you also have the ability to use the pencil, which is really good for shading in and selecting items with a lot of precision, much more precision than I can do with the mouse. So maybe that's been some help. I don't know. If you if you see this video and want any pointers, or want me to cover anything else, or want me to try using GIMP or Paint.net or anything to achieve a similar result, let me know in the comments. And I guess I'm going to go charge my camera up, and we'll see you in the next live stream. Thanks for joining me, everyone.